Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thank you for being here. Tomorrow is the inauguration, so we are going to be covering that live at 11 o'clock Eastern, and we think it starts like 11:30-ish or noon Eastern, and we'll cover it for as long as it goes. So we know that the media deals in constant outrage nonstop, and you're just bombarded with it, which is why I'm off big tech, and you can join me at mikeslater.locals.com. We talked a lot about that yesterday. MikeSlater.locals.com. It is a quiet place where we can think deeply about things. The media can't have that. They need to keep you thinking shallowly, keep you outraged, keep you addicted, makes them rich. The media's thing right now, these last couple days, and all day today and tomorrow, is to create this made up, like Jason Bourne movie in your head, that there's some insider attack, there's an insider plot to kill Joe Biden tomorrow. Why are they doing this? To keep you scared, to keep you anxious, and to keep you watching and clicking. So I first heard this maybe like 2 days ago, and I heard that Biden's transition team was worried that there might be Trump loyalists in the National Guard and in the Secret Service, and they might turn their guns on Biden during the inauguration. That's the dystopian fantasy in their head. And I heard that they asked commanders to confiscate all the ammunition and magazines from soldiers in the Capitol. Now that sounds crazy and ridiculous, but then someone shared this picture of a soldier at the Capitol, and there's no magazine in the gun. He's just carrying a big metal stick. And I've seen many more pictures like that. Now, I've seen some pictures with guys with ammo, but a lot without. And like, what's the point of that? Why would you have a guardsman there with a gun with no bullets? We've heard that the Biden administration, the transition team, asked if they could do some sort of background checks or somehow and determine which soldiers voted in Republican primaries or which have contributed to Republican candidates, so that I guess they can station those potential domestic terrorists, insurrectionists away from the president-elect. This is a Washington Post headline. No stone unturned. Apparently the FBI has vetted people close to the president-elect to see if they've had any extremist views, whatever that even is anymore, right? I think an extremist view today is, if you think there was any election funny business going on, right? Honestly, I wonder if I was in the National Guard, if I would be allowed to be near the president-elect because I've tweeted before about the indefinitely confined voter in Wisconsin, right? Is that too extremist for the FBI? We got some more. This is the Army Times. After deadly Capitol riot, Army looking at which troops require security screening ahead of the Biden inauguration. AP, the defense officials tell AP they fear possible inside attack at inauguration. They're having National Guard troops in D.C. vetted, right? So what's going on here? Because that's crazy. There's a mistrust going on that's being fueled. All of my studying and talking with people who have lived in repressive regimes, distrust of each other is a very common theme. You can't talk to anyone, right? Because you're not sure if they're gonna turn you into the government. And everyone's looking at each other skeptically nonstop. This is not good. And this rhetoric of calling all conservatives domestic terrorists is not helping the unity. And not even calling all conservatives, this rhetoric of calling the National Guardsmen potential domestic terrorists. Pelosi said she's concerned about lawmakers and their guests bringing guns to the inauguration. There's a new congresswoman from Colorado, and she carries her gun with her. And she said, yeah, I carry it. I'm 5 feet tall, 100 pounds. And so she carries her gun to Congress, and I guess that's not allowed or something. I don't know what the rules are with that. But now they have metal detectors for congressmen at the Capitol, which is so bizarre because what's the concern? Literally, what are you do you think Lauren Boebert is gonna shoot up Congress? Like that's it. You need metal detectors to make sure that she doesn't. Seriously, what is your worry exactly? Spell it out. Be specific. So the 25,000 soldiers in D.C., the guardsmen, it's like Baghdad in 2004 in D.C. right now. Why? Could be a couple things. Listen, maybe there's some threat we don't know about. Some legitimate threat we don't know. I doubt it. Okay. I think it's a combination of a couple things. First, it's certainly an overreaction from what happened back at the Capitol a couple weeks ago. All right, so whoever was in charge, and there were a lot of people who dropped the ball and intentionally did not have sufficient security for the counting of the electors. And they did not want to have a large police or military presence because they didn't like the optics of it, right? Everything that happened at the Capitol a couple weeks ago, every single part of it could have been avoided. Right? And I think the sergeant at arms quit or got fired or whatever, right? So right now, everyone is CYA, right? Everyone's covering their you-know-what and going way overboard, right? That's the first thing. It's definitely true. The second thing, everyone's a little twitchy right now. I guess there was like some fire yesterday and like big time news alerts about a fire and smoke and like people were like, oh, it's a bomb or whatever. I don't know what it was, but it was nothing. So everyone's a little like on edge right now. I also think there's an element of, look how dangerous America is. Look at the lengths that we have to go to keep you safe. This is what the Trump administration has done to us. Look at what look what it's done. Look at the domestic terrorist threat that now exists because of Donald Trump. Look at the domestic terrorism. It's just so much of it because of Donald Trump. And we don't know where it is. We don't even know. It could be everywhere. It's your neighbors. It's your friends. These are the people who teach your children. Could be a domestic terrorist. We're going to do a segment tomorrow how in 2020, the theme from the left was defund the police. In 2021, the theme from the left is fund the secret police. There's like literal talk about like starting a 9/11 commission against domestic terrorism and creating like a unit in the CIA to use the techniques we used against Al-Qaeda against Americans here. So we got to defund the police, but fund a secret police. The left has lost their minds. Look at the lengths we have to go to now, American people. When again, what happened at the Capitol a couple weeks ago could have been avoided completely with a moderate police presence, which intentionally did not exist. But now they're using that to justify this and to keep the narrative of domestic terrorism is real. And this is all because of you, conservatives. How could you have led us to this? And you look at this and you're like, oh, none of this is actually really necessary. So I think it's a lot of those last couple points. And then the media, just always wanting to keep you scared and watching and clicking. A viewer sent me this. I posted it on mikeslater.locals.com. It's perfect. It's 2 minutes, so I'm hesitant to play the whole thing, but it's just perfection for 2 minutes. It's called What the News Is. Here it is.
Person. People. Person realizes people need...
Hey people, what do you want? Some news? Yeah, some news. We want news. Some news, please.
Person gives people news.
The world is round. Wow. It's going to rain tomorrow. Wow. Less people are dying because technology is improving. Oh wow, that's so cool. Bad things happen here and then, but oh my god. We have police to catch the bad guys, so it's okay. Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
The next day.
The news is still pretty much the same as yesterday. Oh, okay.
A few days later.
Yeah, the news is still the same. This is getting boring now. Yeah, this is getting boring.
A few more days later.
Anything interesting happen or... Nah. I don't like the news anymore.
A wild news competitor appears.
Everybody, I have more news. Yay! Yay! Hurrah! Hooray! A man died yesterday. Oh no, that's so sad. Hey, you're stealing my audience by only telling them worst-case scenario stories which take advantage of a human cognitive bias. That means we naturally pay more attention to negative events. Screw you, pal.
The competition for attention begins.
Hey, some random celebrities that you don't care about are getting divorced.
Oh no, not the celebrities.
Hey everyone, the sun gives you cancer.
Why is this so entertaining?
Bacon gives you cancer. Terrorists, they're coming to get you. There's a virus spreading around the world. Nobody can do anything to stop it, and you're all going to die.
So perfect. I don't want to play that game anymore. I don't want to play that game. And that's all we're going to do the next couple days, or today and tomorrow, is hear about how dangerous it is in Washington, D.C. Because that's CNN or whatever. It's just that guy on the soapbox saying, hey, everybody, you're all going to die. That's the news. This was Wolf Blitzer the other day. There's very disturbing breaking news here in Washington. We debunked this story yesterday. It wasn't fake inaugural credentials, but the whole story was wrong. But I love this. The beginning of that tweet's so amazing because he's even telling you how to feel about it. What I'm going to tell you is very disturbing, everyone. The game is to keep you scared. Coming up next, I want to talk about how moral panics work so we know where we are on the timeline of it. Do that next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, coming up in a couple minutes here, I want to read a letter from W.E.B. Du Bois, a letter that he wrote to his daughter back in 1914, who was going off to a private boarding school in England, and the advice that he gave his 14-year-old daughter, and compare that to the critical race theory, just Black Lives Matter advice, messaging that's coming from the left today. So we're gonna do that coming up in just a few minutes. It's one of my favorite letters. There's a great book called Posterity. You should definitely get it. It's a great book to just have in the car or have laying around if you just got a couple minutes to read something. You're trying to kill time. Just short letters from great Americans to their kids. It's called Posterity. It's really good. Anyway, I want to talk about moral panics and the timeline of moral panicking. This is Nate Silver, who I don't know how he still has a job. He said, I'm pro-lockdown for the time being, given the circumstances of the moment, but I also worry that when we look back in 5 years, we'll discover all sorts of adverse consequences from people being physically and socially isolated from one another. No kidding, Nate. Welcome to the party. One thing I worry about in particular is the combination of reducing education levels, especially among poor children, while simultaneously reducing social ties, and how that could affect support for future authoritarian movements. So we have these lockdowns, at least here in California, still going strong and harder than ever. Poverty for many, but not the elites. The rich are getting richer. The rich are not just only getting richer, the rich are getting 10 times richer. And for the left, who all these years, apparently, they've been saying they're so against income inequality. There's nothing anyone could ever have done that has created more income inequality than these lockdowns this last year, where you have the rich putting their money in the stock market. The stock market tanks. The rich put a ton of money into it. The stock market just immediately comes back, and they're making 10x as much money, right? And then you have poor people who are putting their life savings into rent. So it's gone. The rich got so much richer, and the poor got poorer. Insane. And the left doesn't seem to care. So we got lockdowns. We got poverty for many. Fewer social ties, fewer community connections. All this does is make people more extreme. It makes people more extreme, more desperate, and the worst of all, more nihilistic. Nihilistic is nothing matters anyway. Right? Not a good combination. And Nate is right that tyrants take advantage of that. And this is it's like the news flash of the last 4 years. To the left, Trump was not a tyrant. Trump was not a tyrant. He wasn't even close to a tyrant. But to go back to our last segment, for 4 years, it was fear that, and just scaring everyone that he was a tyrant in every way and that he would never leave the White House and all this stuff. Just insane. People who have lived under actual tyranny, if someone told them that Trump was a tyrant, they would laugh in their face. But if you want to get a tyrant, pretty much everything we're doing now will make that happen. This is a chart from a book called The Sociology of Moral Panics. Can you read it okay? Not that great. Let me do it quick. So they do football hooliganism, soccer hooliganism in Europe as their example. So it starts off with the identification of a problem, and then the identification of a subversive minority. So it's the few who spoil the enjoyment of millions. Then you simplify the cause of it. Then there's a stigmatization of those involved, and the media uses disparaging terms like morons, animals, savages. That's where we've been. All right, we'll get back to this and apply it to us in a second. Then there's the stirring of public indignation, media campaigns calling for action, criticism of soft sentences. Then there's the stamping down hard, government response to public demand as presented by the media, stiffer sentences, more anti-hooligan legislation, bans on spectators, et cetera, and then more authoritarian forms of control. Now, we can run through this outline of moral panic when it comes to COVID, but let's do Trump supporters because that's the big thing of the day. So stigmatization of those involved. We've gone way past, that guy's a political opponent, or even like that guy supports Trump and Trump is going to do terrible things to this country. Okay, like even that's like fine. We're light years past that. We're at domestic terrorist. Okay, and now there's this social, like in person and online segregation and sanctioning going out, shutting down Trump's bank accounts has not gotten anywhere near the attention that deserves. That is crazy. But, and here's the thing, we played clips of this the other day. You have two messages coming on. First, so the media is making the point that the conservatives are domestic terrorists and Trump is like bin Laden, right? So the first message is you got to cut off the head of the snake. And you literally have to treat Trump as if he's bin Laden and sanction him and cut him off from everything, okay? But then once they cut the head off the snake, which they've done, then they're going to come back and say, well, these conservatives this hate is so deeply ingrained in American society. We need to root it out in every way possible because these people are your neighbors and your teachers and our police officers and firefighters and everyone around us. They could be anywhere. So we got to root out these domestic terrorists. Right? Oliver Darcy, we've talked about this too, where he said, the way he worded it is amazing. He said, we're going to have to figure out the One America News and Newsmax problem. What a funny way of putting it. The problem. And then, of course, they're going after Verizon, AT&T, and Comcast for shooting out this dangerous content, as they put it. This is the AP. Podcasts rife with misinformation remain on social platforms like Apple and Google. Can you believe it? As extremists, that's you, exploit a loophole left after the tech companies crack down on other mediums. There was a former intelligence official on PBS last night talking about a 9/11 commission for domestic terrorists, like a new 9/11 commission. And they need to use the lessons from Al-Qaeda that we learned to fight Al-Qaeda here. Jesse Kelly made a great point. He said, America's communists are no different than how communists have always been. They all think the same way and want the same thing. And the silence of opposing views is a basic tenet of that. Someone on Twitter, someone I saw the other day, they wrote, absolutely incredible that we're culturally converging on, you can't say things that aren't true, after literally every other era of human history is a lesson in why not to do that. But this time it'll be different. Anyway, so we're way past the stigmatization of those involved, all right? We're at stirring of public indignation. That's the phase that we're at right now, right? Media campaigns calling for action, criticism of soft sentences. There's a video going around that we may play tomorrow. It's got 2.5 million views right now. It's crazy. It's encouraging everyone to become digital domestic terrorist fighters, to go out there and find the people amongst us, right, who are Trump supporters and silence them. Wow. So the question is are we going to go from the social shaming, all right, the public indignation, into making it like a government sanctioned with the force of law behind it? That would be the stamping down hard phase. That's potentially what's next. A moral panic. That's what we're in the midst of right now. Now, why? Well, politicians love it because they get more power. And the politicians are going to have to figure out a way to open up the economy, because they have to open up the economy eventually because they need to get their tax revenue, right? They need money. So they have to open up the economy eventually, but they also have to figure out a way to do that while keeping all the power, the unprecedented amounts of power that they have over you. And I don't quite know how they're going to do that. But a lot of this moral panic it's a power game, right? They have to keep you outraged so that you can be more easily manipulated so that they can have power over you, right? That's very basic. CNN does it, and the media, they do it because there's an ideological reason, but then there's also obviously a business reason. As we just talked about in the last hour, the more outraged you are, the more you'll watch, the more you'll click. CNN also has another reason for wanting to shut down competitors. It's the same reason all major corporations want to shut down competitors, because the competitors are winning. This is Alex Stamen. He's from the Stanford Internet Observatory. He's the former chief security officer at Facebook. And he outlines very clearly here another reason why CNN wants all these competitors like you and me to be shut down.
We have to turn down the capability of these conservative influencers to reach these huge audiences. There are people on YouTube, for example, that have a larger audience than daytime CNN.
That's it. So on top of the ideological differences, on top of the savior complex that each of these journalists of the Fourth Estate have, thinking they're saving the world from Hitler. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is from New York Magazine just the other day. The headline was "A Beleaguered White House Press Corps." Oh, how did they cover Trump every day? How did they do it? A bunch of American heroes. Doesn't that look like a promo shot for like NCIS or something? A bunch of American heroes, like Navy SEALs they are. So on top of the ideological differences, on top of being the saviors of the world, the movies in their head, on top of all that, they're losing the ratings. So the media, CNN and the rest, they're saying we must silence these hysterical lunatics. They're killing us in the ratings. I got an author coming up next you're going to love, talking about the intrigues and the battles that have existed inside of White Houses forever. And then I want to go to a school up in Cupertino in San Francisco that is teaching elementary school kids this critical race theory nonsense. Talk about that all coming up. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So, inauguration, obviously tomorrow. And a lot has always been said and celebrated about the peaceful transition of power. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's one of the great things about America. There's no doubt about it. But we also romanticize it quite a bit, I think. All right? Because there's no way behind the scenes the people involved are thrilled to hand over power from one administration to the next. Right? Tevi Troy is with us. He is a presidential historian. He's a former White House aide and author of the new book, Fight House: Rivalries in the White House from Truman to Trump. Mr. Troy, how are you, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me, Mike. And I think you're right that we do have this great tradition of peaceful transition of power, but nobody said anything about a happy transition of power. And I think they're two different things.
Very, very good point. Give us an example of where there's been not so happy in the past.
Well, let's look not that long ago when Obama was giving up power to Trump. And there was that famous picture of all of the White House aides kind of gathered together, led by Valerie Jarrett, with faces like this. You know, the big glower. And it was a pretty big picture. I think it was published in Time. And it just showed how unhappy they were. And then even sometimes when it's within the same party, which doesn't happen as often, but when George H.W. Bush took over for Ronald Reagan back in 88, a lot of the Reagan aides thought they were going to get to stay under the Bush administration. Bush wanted to run a less ideological, less conservative administration, and a lot of those Reagan aides got the boot, and they were not happy about it.
Who runs that transition process in the background? What are some insights you have about how that goes down and what conversations are had and how things actually transition?
Yeah, it's a great question. The president-elect, or usually when he's just a candidate, picks someone to head his transition. There's a famous story in the Carter administration. There was a guy named Jack Watson who was and you never heard of him, right? But he was picked to head the Carter transition, and he did all this work months in advance. April of the year before Carter was even elected, nobody even thought Carter had a shot. But he set the Carter administration up to get ready. But Ham Jordan, who was the campaign strategist and a better-known guy who ended up working in the White House for Carter, did not like Jack Watson, and he made sure that Jack Watson didn't get the chief of staff job in the Carter White House. And the Carter White House, from minute one, was a complete mess internally and logistically, and it dated back to transition tension between those two guys.
Okay, so that leads me to one of my big things. Big questions. I was just thinking about this the other day. I have a very nice life here in San Diego. Got my family, got this TV show, radio show. Everything's very peaceful and nice, and I like it. And I just think of I don't even know what word you prefer to use, like acrimony, backstabbing. I don't know, just like the rancidness of what must be going on in DC behind the scenes all the time. I am not cut out for it. Is it as bad as I'm thinking it is?
I would say yes and no. So if you read my book, Fight House, you'll see all these unbelievable stories of really nasty things that people did to one another. But there's also a level of collegiality, not just within one party, but also across the aisle. Sometimes you'll see Democrats and Republicans palling it up when the cameras are not on. So it's kind of a mix. It's like any human interaction. But you're right. If you like your nice life in San Diego and you don't want any tension or backstabbing or elbowing, maybe stay away from the Capitol.
That's right. Give us a story of, we'll start with the most intriguing of them all, right? The backstabbing. What does that look like in a DC world?
Well, the number one tactic is leaking. People will leak nasty stories against one another. And some people even take the leaking thing to a higher level. So when Henry Kissinger was the national security advisor, he hated Secretary of State Rogers, who was an old friend of Nixon, and he was kind of an older guy and more respected, I guess, than Kissinger, who was not well known at the time. Obviously, Kissinger is very famous now. And so Kissinger complains to Nixon that Rogers had leaked to the press that Kissinger is dating Jill St. John, a very attractive Bond girl. The truth is that Kissinger had leaked the story to the press because, A, he wanted everyone to know he was dating Jill St. John, the very attractive Bond girl, but B, he wanted Nixon to think that Rogers was the leaker. So it was kind of like a Machiavellian higher order level of leak.
Oh, I hate all of this. It's fun to look at, but I'm just putting myself in that world. Oh, that sounds horrible. What as you're studying this and you're writing this book, what lessons did you learn about human nature?
Well, first of all, people can be really nasty to one another, and really petty things can set people off. But also, I think I started looking at this during the Trump administration because everyone was saying, White House infighting, it's unprecedented. Well, I am a presidential historian. When I hear the word unprecedented, I look for precedents. And I went back and I found that every single administration I looked at, Truman and Eisenhower and Kennedy and Nixon, all of them had really nasty fights. And it was fun to write because I kind of like I like some of the seedy stuff. I don't want to live it in my life like you. I like to have a nice life without people fighting me, but it is fun to read about.
Give us another example. Go back in time here a little bit. Eisenhower.
Okay, so Truman administration, great example here. So there, again, the Secretary of State, it's often the Secretary of State is against his name is General Marshall. He's against the recognition of the State of Israel. But there's a White House aide named Clark Clifford who is in favor of the recognition of the State of Israel. They have an argument in the Oval Office in front of Truman, and Clifford wins. Israel is recognized and is a great ally of ours through today. But Marshall is so mad that he loses this argument that he never again speaks to Clifford or utters his name for the rest of his life. How's that for holding a grudge?
Jeez. How do these conversations, and obviously there's lots of different examples, but when they're having these conversations and the president's leading them, I'm assuming, right? I have this movie in my head of what this looks like. And the president's leading these conversations with all his people or whatever. How do those normally go? And I'm sure every president's different, but is it an open, honest exchange of ideas? Is it a very like yes man, or whatever the president kind of goes? Is everyone very like CYA and like trying to hanker and align themselves for the next promotion or whatever? What's the general vibe of how these conversations go?
I'd say there's two ways it can go, and I'll tell two quick stories. Number one is that Truman situation where Marshall was so unhappy with Clifford's argument that he asked Truman that Clifford not even be participating in the conversation. He said, "What's Clifford doing here? He's a domestic policy aide." And Truman had to intercede and say, "Well, General, he's here because I asked him to be here." And afterwards, Truman called Clifford in separately and said to him, "Wow, that was rough as a cob, wasn't it?" So that was kind of overt tension. But then you had in the Bush administration, George W. Bush administration, Colin Powell was constantly supposedly fighting with Don Rumsfeld. The truth is the two of them never personally confronted one another. And in fact, there would be meetings where there would be a policy mention, usually about Iraq, and Powell wouldn't say a word. And then you'd read in the press that Powell is opposed to this policy or not. And Rumsfeld would be flabbergasted. He'd say, "We had the meeting and he never said anything." So Powell didn't like what Rumsfeld was doing, but he didn't speak up in the meetings to say so because he didn't like confrontation.
Didn't like confrontation?
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? And in fact, Dick Armitage, who was his deputy secretary of state, would sometimes go and complain about the meeting notes and say, "Hey, look, this meeting doesn't reflect the State Department's view." And the aide, the White House National Security Advisor aides would say, "Well, he was there and he didn't, your boss, your principal, Secretary Powell was there and he didn't say anything. He didn't say anything along the lines of what you're talking about." Jeez. So it was a very passive aggressive way of fighting.
Yeah. Was there any, and unproductive, I'd say, was there any president that stands out to you for surrounding himself with different opinions, right? I mean, the famous example is Lincoln's team of rivals, right? Is there any president that stands out for that, or do people tend to surround themselves with yes men?
So here, let me give you the example of Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton comes in after the 1992 election, first time a Democrat's elected in a while, and it's got some very ambitious and eager, very liberal aides. And they tack the administration too far to the left. And the Clinton administration actually rebuked in the 1994 midterm elections when the Republicans win the control of the House and the Senate for the first time in decades. And Clinton recognizes that he's gone too far to the left, and he brings in a secret aide named Charlie, codenamed Charlie. And Charlie would be giving advice secretly to Clinton that the other aides weren't seeing. But what the result was that you would have the administration doing these more moderate or more conservative things, which really made these progressive aides angry. Eventually, it comes out that Dick Morris is the secret guy, Charlie, and he and George Stephanopoulos, who was one of the leaders of the progressive aides, hated each other, were constantly sniping at each other, were making fun of each other, leaking against each other. It was terrible. But later on, Stephanopoulos recognized that the whole move was classic Clinton. He brought in two different perspectives to get better results out of the staff.
I feel like that'd be the way to do it, right? To have a whole table full of a wide range, and then you, the leader, the president, decide what's best, obviously. Yeah, so good on Clinton for doing that. We'll see if Biden does a similar thing. How did he communicate with Dick Morris? Like you say secretly, but what did that look like?
Clinton would get interrupted with these calls, and he would be told in meetings that his secretary would come in and say, "Oh, Charlie's on the phone." And all the guys would say, "Who's Charlie? What's this Charlie thing?" And,
come on.
I'm not kidding. And they thought maybe it was a secret CIA source. I mean, they just didn't know who or what Charlie was. And then also they would speak at night. Because look, the president is surrounded by his aides during the day. But at night, the aides don't usually cross the colonnade across from the West Wing to the presidential residence. It's maybe 200 feet, but usually you don't see aides going in the residence at night. One exception to that, by the way, was Valerie Jarrett. She used to go and take advantage of her closeness to the Obamas, go into the residence at night, talk about TV shows with them, but also talk about her policy preferences and sometimes get decisions made during the day changed at night. For that reason, she was nicknamed the Night Stalker.
Whoa. Do you think the people in these White Houses, do you think they're motivated by ideology? And I put that in more, maybe like a more, I'd put that as like the pure motivation perhaps in this case. It's like I really believe this is right. Or are they motivated, you think, by power or fame or money? Or what's the chief drive of these people?
It's a combination of ideology, ambition, and kind of petty human jealousy. That's just the way it is. And that actually leads to the three things that presidents have to control this stuff, which is, number one is ideology. The more kind of ideological agreement you have among your staff, then there's going to be less fighting. The second is process. If everybody feels like they get a say at the table, and even if they lose at the end of the day, if they had their shot, they're going to be less likely to leak and backstep. And then the third is presidential tolerance for it. If a president says, oh, yeah, fighting's great, I want to see it, let's have it out, then you're going to see more fighting. But if a president says, I don't want to see this stuff, then you're going to see less of it.
What interesting lessons in leadership here with high stakes. Last question for you, Tevi. I just read that Biden, he's making a lot of these positions in the cabinet, right? And he just named, I think it was the Pennsylvania Health and Human Services person to lead something or whatever, and that's a horrible choice, whatever. And we had a conversation, we're gonna have a conversation soon, about why he chose Kamala Harris and all this. When the president's picking people, do they tend to choose the best person for the job, or are there way more factors going into this than who's the best?
Way more. It is not just about the best. They pick a list of people who could plausibly be qualified for a position. And then they start to look at demographic factors, political factors, who's allied with whom, whether people know each other. Is the cabinet secretary going to make a big push for this person to work under them, or a big push for this person to work against them? So I think it's yes, there's got to be some kind of baseline level of qualifications, but then beyond that, there's a ton of other political factors that go into it.
Do you have any prediction on the Biden administration and with any of the things we've talked about, how he's going to lead?
Yeah, I think he's going to try and have a more moderate tone, but I think the administration he's setting up is for more liberal or more progressive aides, and I think there's going to be some clashing there. And they may also face a mid-course correction in 2022, like other Democratic administrations that went too far in the first 2 years did.
And then, of course, the intrigue with Kamala versus him. What do you make of that?
I think we saw from that the Vanity Fair cover that she's kind of thin-skinned and very concerned about her portrayal. I don't think Biden is as thin-skinned as she is, and I think she's going to want to be involved in everything, which is really not necessarily the vice president's role. So I think there's going to have to be some course corrections there as well, but we'll see.
Yeah, interesting how they handle that. Fight House, rivalries in the White House from Truman to Trump. Tevi Troy. Tevi, thanks for your insight. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. Enjoy that nice life in San Diego.
Exactly. As I'm reading your book, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I'm not there. Thanks, Debbie. I want to come back and read this letter from W.E.B. Du Bois to his 14-year-old daughter. Wonderful advice coming up. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, we have leaked documents from a school, an elementary school in Cupertino. It's one of the richest parts of the country in San Francisco. I want to emphasize elementary school, okay? So they had their elementary school students list out their identities and make an identity map. So as opposed to, hi, I'm Mike, it's, hi, I'm a black, trans, disabled lesbian, or whatever. Elementary school, full of transgender stuff, which we'll get to in a second. Did I mention this is an elementary school? So instead of all this identity nonsense, what should it be? It's very simple. It should be, hi, I'm Mike, and I'm a Cupertino Elementary, I don't know, whatever their mascot is, lion. That's why we have mascots, right? That's what mascots are for. They create unity, right? We have all these different kids from all these different backgrounds, whatever. But when we come to this place, we have to create unity, right? So we can, an identity that we can all grab onto, right? And what is a lion? A lion is brave, and so are we. And a lion is courageous, and a lion, right? That's what mascots are all about. All this critical race theory stuff, all it does is cause division and resentment and hatred of this guy and that guy and everything. And not to mention our country as well. But this is Marxism. The Marxist worldview sees power dynamics in everything. And don't be confused. This is not about being considerate or compassionate and having empathy about others. You can do that and teach that to kids without having kids feel guilty for their power positions or ashamed, right? And without creating resentment. All this does is create hostility and hate. Here's a list here. What's this chart that we have, guys? This is the, So which of your identities hold power and privilege? And these are all the ones that are, that have power and privilege, and you're supposed to circle them and blah, blah, blah. So here's and then you write you're supposed to write a page about your identities and where you stand on the hierarchy, right? So here's an example. This is an example paragraph that they put for elementary school kids. I used to think that everyone is either a boy or a girl, and that you can tell someone's gender just by looking at them. But now I know that gender is something that you get to choose. It can be the same as the sex that the doctor assigned to you at birth, cisgender, or it can be different, transgender. Some people may not identify as either male or female, but rather as non-binary. And it does sentences like that on race and everything else. It's insane. So, this is, if it's not happening at your kid's school now, which it probably is, it will very, very soon. I want to present here an alternative to this poison. I want to share this letter here. I was thinking about this yesterday with Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So this is W.E.B. Du Bois, first, among other things, first African-American to get a doctorate from Harvard in 1890. His daughter, Yolande, was 14 years old. This is 1914. And she was at the top boarding school in England. Right? So think about what's going on here. We have a black girl, 50-ish years after the Civil War, civil rights movement still about 50 years away, so we're right in between these two things. Women still can't vote. She's in a pretty difficult spot. Right? So here's what her dad told her. Above all, remember, dear, that you have a great opportunity. You're in one of the world's best schools, in one of the world's greatest modern empires. Millions of boys and girls all over this world would give almost anything they possess to be where you are. And you are there by no desert or merit of yours, but only by lucky chance. Okay, I love that. Let me take a pause here. I love that line that you're there by lucky chance. You would think today a parent would say, hey, you're at this school, you deserve it. You earned this, you deserve it, good for you. But here's dad saying, you didn't deserve this. You didn't earn this. You're there by luck. Would that make you work harder or not as hard? Here's what he says next. Again, you're there by no desert or merit of yours, but only by lucky chance. Deserve it then. Study. Do your work. Be honest, frank, and fearless, and get some grasp of the real values of life. You will meet, of course, curious little annoyances. People will wonder at your dear brown and sweet crinkly hair. But that simply is of no importance and will soon be forgotten. Remember that most folk laugh at anything unusual, whether it's beautiful, fine, or not. You, however, must not laugh at yourself. You must know that brown is as pretty as white, or prettier and crinkly hair, and as straight even though it's harder to comb. The main thing is that you, beneath the clothes and skin, the ability to do, the will to conquer, the determination to understand and know this great, wonderful, curious world. Don't shrink from new experiences and custom. Take the cold bath bravely. Enter into the spirit of your big bedroom. Enjoy what is, and not pine for what is not. Read some good, heavy, serious books just for discipline. Take yourself in hand and master yourself. Make yourself do unpleasant things so as to gain the upper hand of your soul. Above all, remember your Father loves you and believes in you and expects you to be a wonderful woman. Lovingly yours, Papa. How good is that? Right? There's so much goodness there. Again, the book's called Posterity, and it's Posterity, great letters from great Americans to their kids or something. Great little book. But there's a million things we could talk about here, but the part that stands out to me relevant here is the discrimination, right? If you're being discriminated against for any reason, WEB says it's of no importance. It's like people are these are curious little annoyances of your day. That's it. Today we call those microaggressions. And WEB called it a curious little annoyance. And just whatever, brush it aside. They're laughing at you, this thing about you, because we laugh at things we're not used to. But their laughing is not a judgment on its beauty or its importance or you. It's a reflection on their unfamiliarity with the thing. It's their uncomfortableness. So don't let it bother you. Move on. Move on and dive into the cold bath that is life and master yourself. Take yourself in hand and master yourself. It's perfect. So to bring it back to Cupertino, right? In Cupertino today, the modern advice is you are of this minority subcategory, and therefore, no matter what you do, you can never do enough. You'll always fail. The system's rigged against you, right? Like that's the message our kids are getting today. Here, map out your identity. Where are you, and why are you at such a disadvantage because of these things, and you'll never overcome it. And WEB 100 years ago said, oh yeah, those people who are gonna laugh, work hard. You're lucky to be there, deserve it. Make yourself do unpleasant things, and I love you. Two completely different messages. And just imagine the same kid in parallel universes. One gets the WEB message, one gets the critical race theory message, and where that trajectory would send them for the rest of their lives. We need more W.E.B. Du Bois, and we need to root out this poison, this critical race theory, Marxist poison that is in our schools today. Make sure your kids aren't hearing it, and give them the truth instead. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word.